They say grief can do strange things to a person, twist their perceptions, cloud their judgment, even open doors to things that were never meant to be seen. Tonight, we delve into the chilling tale born from loss, an obsession with the past, and the terrifying consequences of trying to hold on to what's gone. What happens when the memories we cherish become a gateway for something else entirely? Welcome to a story that will make you question the comfort of your own home, the sanctity of memory, and the darkness that might just be lurking behind the static. Get ready to press play on the Nursery Tapes. Now, before we jump into today's story, please hit that like button to get this story out to more people, and subscribe to help this channel grow. I thank you. Now let's jump into it. Chapter 1. The Silence After. It started after my little sister Alara died. Not a sudden dramatic death, no fiery crash or sudden collapse, no swift, merciful end that left no time for lingering pain, but a slow, insidious fate. A sickness that withered her away over months, stealing her laughter, her light, piece by agonizing piece. Her small body, once so full of vibrant energy, so quick to chase butterflies in the garden, so eager to hug, became fragile, translucent almost. Her skin paper thin, over delicate bones, her breath a shallow whisper that barely stirred the air, a ghost of a sound. Each day was a tightening coil of dread, a knot in my gut that grew tighter with every fading smile, every labored breath, watching her slip further away, until one gray morning, the silence in her room was absolute, and her breath simply stopped. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, then exhale a long, mournful sigh, as if it too understood the profound loss. I was 14, old enough to understand what was happening, to grasp the cold, hard concept of death, to see the finality in my parents' vacant stares, their drawn faces, far too young to truly process the crushing, soul-numbing finality of it. The helplessness I felt, watching her slip away, watching my parents crumble into shadows of their former selves, was a cold, unyielding knot in my stomach that never truly loosened. It felt like a vital piece of my own innocence, and hope died with her, leaving a gaping, aching void. My parents, especially my mother, were shattered beyond recognition, their grief a tangible, suffocating presence. My dad, a man once defined by his booming laughter, his strong, comforting presence, and his endless supply of terrible jokes, retreated into himself, becoming a silent, shuffling ghost haunting our once lively home. He spoke in monosyllables, his eyes fixed on some distant, unseen point, as if the world around him had ceased to exist, as if he were already halfway gone, joining Alara in some unreachable place. He barely ate, barely slept, just drifted through the days, a hollowed-out husk. But my mom, she changed, profoundly. It was a transformation that began subtly, a quiet withdrawal, then accelerated into something terrifying, something I couldn't comprehend, something that felt utterly alien. Chapter 2. The Closed Door and the Tapes. She started spending all her time in Alara's old nursery, the door always open, inviting the sunlight and the sounds of play. The innocent chaos of a toddler was now perpetually closed, a barrier, a silent, unyielding declaration of a new, unsettling obsession that consumed her, drawing her deeper into its grasps. I'd hear her in there, sometimes humming, a fragmented lullaby, a tune that was almost, but not quite, Alara's favorite, a melody twisted by grief into something mournful and strange. Other times it was just breathing, deep, ragged sighs that never quite ended, a sound of profound, suffocating sorrow that seemed to echo through the very foundations of the house, vibrating in the floorboards beneath my own bed, resonating in my chest, a constant low thrum. It wasn't a comfortable sound. It was like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something impossible to happen, something unnatural to manifest, something that defied the very laws of nature. The air around the nursery door felt heavy, thick with unspoken grief and something else, something I couldn't quite name, but which prickled the hairs on my arm and made my skin crawl. It was a presence, a weight, an unseen pressure that seemed to push back against anyone who dared to approach. Then came the tapes, old, unlabeled VHS cassettes, their plastic casings worn smooth with age, their labels either peeled off or never applied, as if they had always existed, waiting in the shadows for their moment. I couldn't recall ever seeing them before, yet they simply appeared, stacked horizontally next to an ancient VCR in the living room, a dusty relic from a forgotten decade, one we hadn't used in years, almost forgotten. They seemed to hum with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, a low vibration that only I seemed to feel. My mom would watch them late at night, long after my dad had retired to his silent grief, to his cold, empty side of the bed, his own form of escape. The faint, flickering blue light of the TV cast long, dancing shadows in the hallway, twisting familiar furniture into monstrous, watchful shapes, making the mundane sinister, transforming our home into a stage for something unknown. The soft whir of the VCR's motor, a mechanical sigh in the dead of night, was the only constant sound, a low hypnotic thrum that seemed to lull the house into a false sense of security, a deceptive calm before the storm. When I dared to ask her what they were, her voice would be strangely flat, almost rehearsed, devoid of any genuine emotion, as if she were reading from a script she barely understood herself. "Memories, darling, just memories." But her eyes, when she said it, were wide and distant, unfocused, like she was looking not at the screen, but at something only she could perceive, something beyond the veil of our reality, a secret world she was slowly slipping into, leaving us behind, leaving me utterly alone. A chill, colder than any draft, would trace its way down my spine every time she uttered those words, a premonition of something terrible, something that whispered of forbidden knowledge. Chapter 3. The Glitches. One night, the hum from the nursery was louder than usual, a low guttural vibration that seeped through the walls, making the very air feel thick and heavy, almost viscous, as if it were struggling to move, to breathe. It wasn't a human sound, not really. More like a resonant thrum of a deep, unseen mechanism, a machine slowly winding up, or perhaps winding down, preparing for some final, irreversible act. I couldn't sleep. The hum was a siren call, pulling me from my bed with an invisible magnetic force I couldn't resist, a compulsion stronger than fear. My bare feet were silent on the cold floorboards as I crept out of my room, drawn by the unsettling curiosity that wared fiercely with a primal, instinctual fear that screamed at me to stay hidden, to retreat, to lock myself away. The living room TV was on, the volume barely audible, a faint whisper of distorted sound, like voices trapped beneath water, struggling to be heard. My mom was asleep on the couch, or perhaps merely unconscious, her body slumped at an awkward angle, her face pale and drawn in the flickering light, the remote clutched tightly in her hand, her knuckles white, almost bloodless, as if she was holding on to her last thread of sanity. On the screen, the static-laced image of Alara's nursery flickered, grainy and distorted, bathed in that sickly blue light that seemed to leach all color from the room, leaving everything in shades of gray and shadow. It was an old home video, clearly. The camera was shaky, the colors muted, faded with time, the quality poor, as if recorded on the cheapest possible equipment, or perhaps deliberately downgraded by some unseen force. My mom, younger, her face unlined with grief, her smile genuine and warm, was cooing at the crib, her voice light and full of love, a stark contrast to the hollow shell she had become. And in the crib, a baby Alara, gurgling and kicking her tiny fists, batting at the air, innocent and perfect, a symbol of everything we had lost, everything that was pure. It was a sweet, mundane, the kind of innocent footage any parent would have, a precious glimpse into a lost past, a time before the darkness consumed us. But then, the image glitched violently. The screen fractured into jagged lines of static, then reformed, struggling to maintain its coherence, like a broken mirror trying to piece itself back together, revealing fragments of something else. For a split second, an eternity compressed into a blink. The baby in the crib wasn't Alara, it was something else. Its skin was a sickly gray, almost translucent, stretched taut over what looked like too many bones, too sharp, too angular for any infant, an impossible anatomy. Its eyes were too wide, too dark, twin abysses reflecting no light, no warmth, only a profound, ancient emptiness that seemed to swallow the light around them, pulling it into their depths, and its mouth was stretched into a silent, unnatural grin that seemed to split its face, revealing gums devoid of teeth, a rictus of pure, unholy glee, a silent scream of triumph. It was a caricature of a child, a grotesque parody, a nightmare made flesh, a chilling inversion of everything Alara had been, a violation of her very memory. Then, just as quickly, it was Alara again, innocent and smiling. Obviously, to the horror that had momentarily usurped her image, to the brief, terrifying glimpse of what lay beneath the surface of the recording, I blinked, rubbed my eyes, convinced I had imagined it, a trick of the old tapes, a faulty tracking issue, a figment of my grief-addled mind, a hallucination born of exhaustion and fear. But the memory of that grin, the chilling emptiness in those eyes, was seared into my mind, an indelible brand, a cold, sharp shard of fear that lodged itself deep within me, festering. I couldn't stop watching. My gaze was glued to the screen, a morbid fascination taking hold, a desperate need to understand. Even as my body screamed at me to run, to flee this house and never look back, the video continued. My mom picked up Alara, danced with her, twirling around the nursery, singing a soft, forgotten tune, a scene of domestic bliss that now felt tainted, normal, comforting, a desperate illusion of normalcy that was rapidly crumbling before my eyes. Then another glitch, more subtle this time, but no less terrifying, more insidious. The background shifted. The familiar pastel walls of the nursery seemed to ripple, to stretch and distort as if made of liquid. The patterns on the wallpaper swirling like disturbed water, like a reflection in a dark pool, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. For a fleeting moment, I saw something behind them, a swirling, inky blackness, like looking into a void, a glimpse into a dimension that should not be, a crack in the fabric of reality, a tear in the world, through which something was trying to push through. And from the darkness, faint, indecipherable whispers seemed to bleed through the static, a chorus of unseen voices murmuring just beyond the edge of hearing, just beyond comprehension, like a forgotten language spoken by things that shouldn't exist, things that were reaching out. My heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence of the house, a counterpoint to the distant, rhythmic hum from the nursery. I knew instinctively, with a cold certainty that settled deep in my bones, a certainty that bypassed logic and reason, that these weren't just memories. They were something else entirely. A gateway, a record of a violation, a path being forged where no path should exist, a forbidden ritual captured on magnetic tape, a dark incantation played out for an unseen audience. The tapes were not just recordings, they were invitations, beckoning something from the other side. Chapter 4: The Shifting Reality. The next morning, my mom seemed lighter, her movements more fluid, less burdened by the crushing weight of grief, almost buoyant, as if a great burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Her eyes had a spark I hadn't seen since before Alara got sick, a strange, almost feverish glint that made them seem unnaturally bright, too bright. She even smiled, a genuine, albeit fragile, smile that didn't quite reach the haunted depths of her eyes. A smile that was more unsettling than her previous despair. A mask of false cheer that barely concealed the madness beneath. "I had a wonderful dream last night," she said, her voice almost cheerful, a stark contrast to her usual melancholic tone. "Alara was with me. She was laughing. We played in the nursery, just like old times. It felt so real." She hummed a little tune as she made breakfast, a tune I recognized from the tapes, a melody that now sounded sinister, a prelude to something dark, a siren song. I tried to talk to my dad, to tell him about the tapes, about the nursery, about the chilling glitches and the terrifying face I'd seen. I tried to convey the creeping horror, the growing sense of wrongness that permeated our home, the feeling that our very reality was fraying at the edges. But he just nodded vaguely, his gaze unfocused, lost in his own private torment, his own impenetrable fog of grief. He was too far gone, too consumed by his own pain to see the insidious horrors unfolding around him, to notice the subtle shifts in our world. "Your mother's grieving, son," he mumbled, his voice hoarse, dismissive, waving a hand as if to brush away my fears, to dismiss my sanity. "We all are. She needs this. Let her cope in her own way. Don't upset her. Don't make things harder than they already are." He didn't see it. He couldn't, or perhaps he simply refused to. Too afraid to confront the possibility that his wife was losing her mind, or worse, that something truly monstrous was taking root in our home, something that would devour us all. He was too deep in his own despair to notice the abyss opening beneath our feet, consuming our family, one soul at a time, pulling us all into its depths. I was alone in my growing terror, isolated in a house that was slowly becoming something else, something alien and malevolent, a stage for a horrific rebirth, a place where the veil between worlds was thinning. Days turned into weeks, each one dragging by with a suffocating sense of dread that clung to me like a shroud, tightening its grip, making every breath a struggle. My mom spent more and more time in the nursery, hours stretching into entire days, the hum growing stronger, more resonant, almost a low chant now, a continuous, hypnotic drone that vibrated through the floorboards and into my very bones, a constant reminder of her descent, of the growing presence within the room. The tapes were always playing, sometimes the same one on repeat for hours, its distorted images burning into my subconscious, sometimes a different one, each viewing revealing new, subtle horrors, new glimpses of that other reality, that dark dimension bleeding into ours. I started to notice other things. The air in the house grew colder, even with the heating on full blast, a bone-deep chill that seemed to emanate directly from the nursery itself, a cold that felt unnatural, like the breath of something dead, something ancient and unfeeling, a cold that seeped into my very marrow, a faint, sweet smell, like decaying lilies or stagnant water, permeated the air, clinging to my clothes, my hair, a cloying, sickly scent that made my stomach churn and my head ache, a smell that hinted at corruption. And sometimes, from the nursery, I'd hear a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound, like tiny fingernails dragging across wood, or something trying to claw its way out of a confined space, desperate to escape, or to enter, or both. It was relentless, a soft, rhythmic rasping that would start and stop, until my nerves were frayed, my sleep haunted by the sound, my dreams filled with scratching and distorted faces, and the chilling whisper of mine. Chapter 5. The Invitation. One evening, as twilight bled through the windows, painting the world in shades of bruised purple and gray, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched like grasping fingers. My mom called me into the nursery. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, a siren's call. But it sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins, a cold dread that paralyzed me for a moment, rooting me to the spot. My stomach clenched, a cold knot of dread tightening with every reluctant step I took towards that forbidden door. Each step a struggle against an unseen force. I hadn't been in there since Alara died, hadn't dared to cross the threshold of that haunted room, not since the day the silence had fallen like a shroud, suffocating all joy. The room was dim, lit only by a single bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows that danced with every flicker, making the familiar unfamiliar, twisting it into something monstrous. The wooden crib was still there, a silent sentinel, its bars like prison bars, holding something captive, or perhaps keeping something out. The rocking horse, frozen mid-gallop, its painted eyes staring into nothingness, into the dark, seemed to watch me. But on the small table next to the crib, there was a new addition, a small, crudely carved wooden doll, wrapped tightly in a piece of Alara's old blanket, a tattered, faded scrap of fabric that once held warmth, now a macabre shroud. Its eyes were two black beads, staring blankly, yet seeming to follow my every move, unnervingly, like a predator's gaze. A silent accusation. It felt wrong, utterly wrong, like a child's toy possessed by something ancient, something that had no right to be there, something that had been waiting patiently for its moment. "She's coming back," my mom whispered, her voice trembling with a terrifying joy that was utterly alien, a sound that made my skin crawl, a sound of pure, unadulterated madness. Her eyes, usually clouded with grief, now gleamed with a manic, unsettling light, reflecting the bare bulb's glare, burning with an unholy fire, a terrifying zeal. "I'm bringing her back. She's almost here. Just a little more. The ritual is nearly complete." I looked at the doll, then at my mom. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken deep into their sockets, framed by the dark circles. Her skin stretched taut over her bones, almost translucent, as if her life force was being drained. But there was a manic energy about her, a desperate, unhinged determination that was more frightening than any despair I had ever witnessed, a terrifying strength born of obsession. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, thick with fear, a plea lost in the suffocating air, unheard, drowned out by the hum. She didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the crib, on the doll, her attention completely consumed. Her world narrowed to this single, horrific purpose. Instead, with a slow, deliberate movement, she picked up one of the VHS tapes. It was labeled, in her shaky, almost illegible handwriting, "Alara's First Steps." The irony was a cruel twist, a mockery of innocence, a perversion of a cherished memory. She inserted it into the portable VCR she had set up next to the crib, its wires snaking across the dusty floor like grasping tendrils, connecting the mundane to the monstrous, weaving a web of dark magic. The screen flickered to life, the familiar grainy image of Alara, toddling across the nursery floor, her tiny legs unsteady, her laughter echoing faintly from the speakers. A ghost of a sound, a painful reminder of what was lost. My mom watched, her breath hitched in her throat, a silent, desperate prayer on her lips, her body rigid with anticipation, trembling with a terrible excitement, a horrifying ecstasy. And then the glitches started, more frequent now, more pronounced, tearing through the image like jagged claws, distorting the innocent scene, unraveling it, revealing the true nature of the recording. The walls of the nursery on the screen warped and stretched, the air shimmering as if seen through rising heat, or a veil being torn, revealing glimpses of the blackness beyond, a swirling chaos. And the baby Alara on screen, her features would twist, her limbs elongate, her tiny hands becoming claw-like, reaching out from the screen as if trying to grasp something, to pull herself free, or to pull us into the void. My mom started to hum, a low rhythmic sound that seemed to synchronize with the glitches on the screen, a primal ancient chant, a wordless incantation that vibrated in the very air, making my teeth ache. The wooden doll on the table began to vibrate, faintly at first, then more intensely, rattling against the wood, its black bead eyes seeming to glow with a faint inner light, a malevolent spark that pulsed with each hum. The scratching sound from the crib grew louder, more insistent, a frantic, desperate scraping, like something trapped, or something trying to break free, or something hungry trying to get out, its impatience growing. Chapter 6. The Unholy Birth. Suddenly, the image on the screen froze. It was the other baby. The one with the wide, dark eyes and the unnatural grin. It stared out from the screen, directly at me. Its black eyes boring into my soul, a cold, knowing gaze that pierced through my very being, stripping away all pretense of safety, leaving me utterly exposed. And then, its mouth moved, not in a gurgle, not in a cry. It formed a single, clear word, perfectly articulated, yet devoid of any human warmth. A voice that was ancient and dry, like rustling leaves, like crumbling stone. A whisper from a forgotten tome. Mine. At the same instant, the wooden doll on the table flew across the room, striking the wall with a sickening thud, splintering into pieces, its black eyes staring accusingly from the broken shards, as if it had served its purpose, and was now discarded. A mere tool. The crib began to rock violently, even though no one was touching it, swaying back and forth with impossible force, creaking like old bones, groaning under the unseen weight, as if something immense was pushing against it from within. And from inside the crib, a sound emerged. Not a baby's cry, not a human hum. It was a wet, sucking gasp, followed by a low, rasping breath, like something struggling to draw air into lungs that hadn't breathed in a very long time. A sound of desperate, ravenous consumption, of something being born, or reborn, in the most horrific way imaginable, pulling itself into our world. My mom let out a choked sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. Her face contorted into a grotesque parody of maternal love. Her features twisted with a joy that was pure madness, a terrifying rapture that consumed her entirely. "Lily," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the crib, her voice thick with a joy that was pure madness. A name I'd never heard her utter before. A name that now tasted like ash in my mouth. A name that heralded doom. I stumbled backwards, my heart seizing in my chest, a cold spike of terror piercing me, paralyzing me, rooting me to the spot, my muscles locked in fear. I didn't know what Lily was, but I knew, with a horrifying certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it wasn't Alara. It was the thing from the tape, the thing that had been waiting behind the veil, drawn by my mother's desperate grief, by the raw, potent sorrow that had been offered up as a sacrifice, a bait, a key to unlock the forbidden. It was something ancient, something malevolent, something that had answered the call, and now it was here, fully manifested. The room was filled with the stench of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp, like old blood and ozone, a smell that burned my nostrils, making my eyes water, making me gag. The air grew heavy, suffocating, pressing down on me, stealing my breath, making my lungs ache, as if the very oxygen was being consumed by the burgeoning presence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My eyes were fixed on the crib, unable to tear away from the horror unfolding before me. A scene burned into my memory forever, a permanent scar on my psyche, a vision of pure dread. A small, pale hand, too long and too thin, with fingers that seemed to bend in unnatural angles, slowly, agonizingly, curled over the edge of the crib. Its skin was mottled, grayish, almost translucent, revealing faint blue veins beneath, and the nails were long, sharp and black, like obsidian claws, perfectly manicured. It was followed by a patch of dark, matted hair, clinging to a scalp that looked too large for a child, misshapen, almost bulbous, with faint, pulsing veins visible beneath the skin. And then an eye, wide and black, devoid of iris or pupil, a bottomless pit, stared out at me from the shadows of the crib, a gaze that felt like a physical touch, cold and invasive. It wasn't the eye of a child. It was ancient, malevolent, and filled with a hunger that made my blood run cold, a hunger that promised to consume everything, to devour not just flesh but soul, leaving nothing but an echoing void, a hollow shell. My mom reached out, her fingers trembling, to touch the emerging form, a gesture of profound, misguided affection. A mother welcoming her child, oblivious to the monstrous reality, lost in her delusion. A single tear, not of sorrow, but of deranged joy, rolled down her gaunt cheek, reflecting the sickly glow from the crib. A final, horrifying image of a mother's love twisting into something unspeakable, something truly demonic. Chapter 7. The Escape and the Echo. I didn't wait to see more. The paralysis broke. A raw, guttural scream tore from my throat, unheard in the cacophony of the nursery, lost in the rising hum and the wet, sucking sounds. I turned and ran. I ran out of the nursery, the wet, sucking sounds and my mother's delirious whispers echoing behind me. A symphony of pure horror that would forever haunt my nightmares, a soundscape of madness. I ran out of the house, not caring where I went, just away from the echoing hum, the flickering tape, and the thing that was slowly, unnervingly crawling out of Alara's crib, brought back into the world it didn't belong in. A world it would surely consume, starting with my family, starting with my mother. I never went back, I couldn't. The thought of that house, that room, that thing, was enough to send shivers through my very core, to make my stomach clench and my breath hitch. I live far away now, in a small, sterile apartment, in a city where the constant noise drowns out the quiet horrors, where the lights are always on, far from old houses and VHS tapes. I keep the lights on, always a futile attempt to ward off the shadows. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, a low, mournful sound, and the silence of my new, empty room presses in, a silence that feels too loud, too pregnant with unseen things. I swear I can still hear it, that low, guttural hum, vibrating in the very air, in the walls around me, and then the faint, wet, sucking sound, as if something is still feeding, still growing endlessly, and sometimes a whisper, carried on the wind, through the closed windows, through locked doors, that sound disturbingly like my mother's voice, calling a name that isn't Alara's, a name that belongs to something else, something that was brought back, and is still very, very hungry, and I wonder sometimes if it's still looking for me, If it remembers the one who saw, if it's coming, and if it finds me, what will it want? If you made it this far, I appreciate you. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed the content. Hey, and leave a comment down below if you have a story you'd like me to read. And subscribe to help the channel grow. Thank you. See you next time.